You can feel it, can't you? Something isn't quite right. You can't say what it is, but you know it's there, lurking just outside your consciousness, an underlying sense of dread that you can't escape but can't quite explain either. I know you feel it because I feel it too. So does every American, rich or poor, left wing or right wing, young or old. It's a dark cloud hanging over the nation. Everyone senses that something is coming. My name is Sam Putnam, and ever since I felt this strange phenomenon, I've devoted a whole lot of time to trying to understand it. And what my investigation has unearthed is something that I've never covered ever before. It's something I've never seen covered by any other publication or media outlet. It's something that deeply concerns me and I think should concern you too. You see, years after pulling on this thread, I've come to realize that what's happening right now is not random and it's not just in our heads. There is a very real, immensely powerful force at work, the kind of thing that lies dormant for centuries. But then when it's triggered, it unleashes a seismic chain reaction that changes everything. It changes everything for the good, and for a lot of people, it changes things for the bad. One of America's leading thinkers puts what's happening right now like this. These kinds of changes have always been a double-edged sword. Fire kept us warm and cooked our food, but fire also burned down our houses. It's that kind of razor's edge that we're sitting on today, and it's that kind of thing that's about to happen again. I can sense it, and I think you probably can too. And if you felt this, maybe you thought it was really all about politics. I mean, our politics have become unbelievably toxic, or maybe you thought it was just this enormous wealth gap that's arisen in America. Or maybe you thought it was a consequence of this insane culture war that we've seen for the last decade. But those are actually just the symptoms. Those are the surface level manifestations of what's happening. But what's really happening is far deeper. It's more powerful. And this is something that's been building and building for years. The force that's really behind all these things is something that a Nobel Prize winner says is not just dividing the economy, but it's actually dividing the entire world. And what my research shows is that the connective tissue behind these changes, they're really what explains all the unrest and all the division and all the violence that we're seeing in our country. This is the real reason why you see so many people voting for socialism. And it's the real reason why almost 70% of people in America believe that the American dream is no longer possible. This is why from coast to coast, Americans have lost hope. They're also losing their optimism, and they're seeing their dignity drained by a despair they can't explain. Well, it's all connected and almost nobody understands it. The truth is, tens of millions of Americans are about to be permanently displaced, and it's going to happen far faster than anyone imagines, with one of the world's leading evolutionary biologists warning the scale and speed of this displacement is going to result in an unprecedented catastrophe. That's not a prediction, it's happening right now with a report from National University showing 14% of Americans have already been crushed by this force. And today you'll hear about those who have been displaced. You'll also meet this small minority of Americans who are immune to these forces, those who saw the writing on the wall and prepared themselves and their loved ones, and as a result are actually amassing more wealth than ever before. Because what millions of Americans are feeling right now, this deep unease seeping through the nation's consciousness, it's not paranoia. It's the early warning sign of a pivotal turning point in history. It's a moment that I call the final displacement, and you and I have never seen anything like this before. This is far different than the dot-com collapse, the global financial crisis, even CO-19. Nothing we've seen in our lifetime holds a candle to what's coming next. Displacements of this magnitude have only happened 4 times across the vast expanse of human history, and each one defined an entirely new age. These displacements have toppled and raised empires. They've started and ended wars, usurped kings, reshaped political systems, and lifted millions from poverty while condemning millions more to the poorhouse. As historian Neil Postman explains it, these moments are both a burden and a blessing. And now we're living through another one of those periods. As you'll see, I and many of the world's leading experts believe this could actually be the final displacement, a turning point that the former CEO of Google says is the most important thing that's going to happen in about 500 years, maybe 1,000 years of human society. and it's happening in our lifetime. As this unfolds, it threatens to upend every aspect of our daily lives, from how we work, how we provide for our loved ones, to how we save and invest for the future. Yet nobody is warning you about what's about to happen. Instead, we've been kept distracted by the inane trivialities of bread and circuses, while the very fabric of our lives erodes beneath our feet. As former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers says, when your great-grandchild writes the history of this period, my guess is that stuff about Donald Trump and the Chinese President Xi will be second or third behind this story. What's the first story historians will write about? It will be the final displacement. Because just like each of these past displacements, I believe we're about to be plunged into a period of dramatic, almost unimaginable change. Politicians, companies, and economies will rise and fall. The most sacred of our social contracts will be broken, and our way of life that stood for generations will be swept away in the blink of an eye. And of course, throughout it all, vast fortunes will be made, and many will be lost. I'm talking about a generational transfer of wealth, the type that can either enrich you or impoverish you based on the decisions you make in the days and weeks ahead, because history shows us that while these societal shifts always lead to catastrophic losses for those who refuse to prepare, they also unleash unprecedented wealth-building potential for those who understand and harness the enormous forces at work. Whether it was the House of Medici, the 15th century banking dynasty that held all of Europe in the palm of its hand, financing popes, kings, and entire nation-states, or the industrialists of the 19th century whose names still adorn the grandest buildings across America, or more recently the tech titans of the digital age like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Larry Ellison. Each displacement in turn triggered a once-in-a-generation wealth transfer that gave birth to a new ruling elite. However, I believe the fortunes that will be created and destroyed this time around will be greater than any we have ever seen before. McKinsey estimates the global economic value of these changes could be worth as much as $25 trillion every year, an amount that dwarfs anything in our economic history. But this new wealth will not be distributed equally. Whether you ascend to an entirely new level of prosperity and freedom or are left behind with your standards of living collapsing, that depends on what you do today. Because this wealth will only flow towards a select group of individuals, those who understand the realignment we're in and take the necessary steps to profit from it. And listen, this is already happening. Goldman is now reporting that an average of 1,600 new millionaires are being created every day, while at the same time, tens of millions of ordinary Americans are falling further and further behind, not because they're lazy, reckless, or unwilling to work, but simply because they are the unknowing, unwitting victims of the final displacement. Although you can't stop these forces, no individual can. Each of us can choose whether to be crushed beneath these forces or carried upward by them. And whether you're enriched or impoverished by what happens next, everything depends on how you prepare. Because while you might disagree with me about the scale or the speed at which all of this is happening, there's no denying that it is happening right now. And there's no escaping that you and your loved ones will be impacted by this. And whether it's for the good or the bad, that is only a decision you can make. Today, I'll share everything that my work has uncovered, and while your gut instinct may be to dismiss all of this, to think, this won't happen to me, or if this were so real, every news channel would be covering it. Don't be so sure. Those in power have no incentive to lift the wool from your eyes because they know displacements of this magnitude always precede political unrest and violence. Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, Gavin Newsom. They would all rather hide the truth and tell you the other side's to blame for all the troubles, while ignoring the fact that the final displacement isn't political. It's coming for all Americans and makes no exception for your age, race, religion, or political affiliation. In fact, as you'll see in just a moment, there's only one factor that can determine whether you'll be on the inside or permanently shut out. Cast aside into what you've all, Noah Harari warns, could become a new useless class, people who are devoid of any economic value whatsoever. So while our research is typically reserved for customers of my financial advisory stocks community, given the magnitude of this story, I've released this documentary for free in an effort to help as many Americans as possible prepare for the final displacement. I'll share the same steps I'm taking to protect myself, my loved ones, and my financial future, the steps that I'm certain will propel my wealth to a new level and that I believe could do the same for your wealth if you follow the simple steps I'll share with you today. I want to warn you though, you may need to watch this documentary more than once for the weight of what's coming to really sink in. I've been a student of history, economics, and finance for more than a decade. My work's been followed by everyone from top Wall Street companies and banks to even famous celebrities and NASA scientists. And at first, even I struggled to wrap my head around the significance of these enormous events. But the facts are facts, and you can verify all my sources for yourself. And whether you agree or disagree, it really makes no difference. All I know is that I'm in Elon Musk camp when he says, quote, "People will be talking about this moment in 100 years. And although some of this may sound crazy at first, just remember, people called me crazy when I warned about the small cap index's impending collapse. People called me crazy in November of last year when I predicted one stock making up an entire percent of the index, Bloom Energy, was overvalued. And one of this AI darling stocks was about to get repriced lower. People laughed when I said the bull market was not to continue month after month after month since the April tariff lows. Of course, the crypto liquidation happened in October and the Trump-China rare earth tensions ratcheted up in November, and those kept the market choppy for months. People laughed when in December 2025 I explained that quantum was a bunch of nonsense, and instead I predicted that the bounce in quantum computing stocks was what's called a dead cat bounce and unlikely to continue upward. Of course, that's now come true. But think about people who laughed during the start of this year when I was among the first in the country to announce that I think gold could still go another 10% or more from where it was at. I told my viewers it was an historic opportunity to buy the world's greatest businesses, gold miners, at prices that most shorts were already salivating at. That call alone could have made you life-changing wealth if you had only listened. The shorts did get squeezed. People who kept riding gold up for another few weeks made out like bandits. Now, I know many people will again say this is all crazy, but I ask that you allow me to lay out the facts for you and then you can make up your mind. Personally, I've never been so certain of a prediction in my life, and if you act now while everyone else is still burying their head in the sand, I believe the next decade will be the single greatest opportunity to generate real lasting wealth in the history of humanity. The type of real lasting wealth that could ensure your financial future, your way of life, and even your freedoms during what could be one of the most disruptive periods we've ever seen. As I said, my name is Sam Putnam. While you may not know me, you definitely know my ideas. In the late 2010s, I founded what would grow to become one of the world's most forward-thinking research consultancies with ideas about the coming AI revolution that were disseminated in a dozen countries. And over the past decade, I've helped viewers successfully navigate and profit from just about every major economic and financial event. This story, though, could be the most important expose we've ever published because this is not about whether any individual stock succeeds or whether some stock is over or undervalued like Nvidia. This is about a turning point in history, the kind we've only seen a handful of times in thousands of years. See, every era of human history has an engine, a force that drives progress, creates fortunes, and rewrites the rules of society, but it wasn't always this way. In fact, for the first several thousand years of human history, there was no engine. There was no progress. For all intents and purposes, life for a farmer in ancient Athens looked almost identical to life in Mesopotamia 2,000 years earlier. Sometimes harvests were better, sometimes worse, but living standards never noticeably improved. For millennia, humans lived hand to mouth, and the world you were born into was the world you were dying. That finally began to change around the time of Hercules, the man known as the first citizen of Athens. Engineering marvels began to emerge like aqueducts, paved roads, and water wheels that pushed civilization and production forward. Economic growth began to occur for the first time ever. It was almost imperceptible, though. I'm talking about 2 to 3% per century, and no individual lived long enough to see any real amount of progress in their own lifetimes. That progress took centuries to register. Yet it continued across the ages. It marked the first great turning of the wheel. Then finally, in the 16th century came the first sea change. The Renaissance caused growth to surge tenfold, going from roughly 2% per century to 20% per century. The printing press, it spread knowledge at scale, and the scientific method unlocked discovery. Advances in navigation and banking opened new financial frontiers, and it created colossal fortunes. The Medici of Florence, merchant princes of Venice, and joint stock companies like that of the Dutch and British East India Companies. For ordinary people, life was improving, but only over the passage of decades, generations. It was during the arrival of the Industrial Revolution that economic progress became visible in a single lifetime. Growth exploded to almost 2%, not per century, but per year. Railroads stitched nations together, electricity lit up homes, steam engines powered industries, and for the first time in history, the world you were born into was not the world that you would die in. That is the period when much of the modern world that we know today was created. It paved the way for enormous fortunes: Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt. But that was nothing compared to what's coming next. Because in the late 20th century came the age of computing. Semiconductors, microprocessors, computers, and the internet ushered in a new wave of progress. Global communication became instantaneous and free. Information could be replicated at zero marginal cost. Economic growth accelerated again, reaching close to 3% annually. Excuse me, that may sound like a small increase, but compounded across an economy, it created the greatest middle-class expansion the world had ever seen. And it minted an entirely new ruling class of wealth that we see today. Each of these past displacements, stretching across thousands of years, led to a step change in economic growth and civilization. Events that one Harvard economist and advisor to U.S. presidents has called historic discontinuities in the growth process. They took us from zero growth for the millennia to growth measured by the century, then eventually by the decade, and ultimately by the year. And each and every one of these leaps forward was due to the arrival of a new, powerful, and disruptive technology. Whether it was the printing press, the steam engine, or the microchip, the pattern has been the same. A breakthrough upended how society functioned, creating immense fortunes for those on the frontier while rewriting how the entire world worked. Take the printing press. Before Gutenberg, information was controlled by the Catholic Church and a tiny clerical elite. Books were copied by hand. Literacy was a privilege of kings, nobles, and the clergy. As they controlled the written word, the church effectively controlled the flow of knowledge across all of Europe. What people believed, what they studied, even what they thought about. Whether it was God, science, or the world, it was effectively controlled by one group until the printing press shattered that monopoly. Suddenly, information could be reproduced cheaply in massive numbers and ideas disseminated through the land. It broke the Vatican stranglehold on information and fueled the Reformation, the scientific revolution, and the Enlightenment. Or consider the steam engine. For thousands of years, production's been limited by human and animal muscle, or at least by contraptions like water wheels. But finally, in 1769, James Watson's steam engine unleashed the power of mechanization and the ability to turn sources of energy like wood and coal into raw power. This was the backbone of the Industrial Revolution. It lifted hundreds of millions of people from poverty, fueled the rise of railroads, factories, and modern cities, and gave humans mastery over energy for the first time in history. Without these technologies, there's no telling what our world would look like because, as the famed economist Joel Mueller puts it, growth isn't natural. It's the product of man's ingenuity. And now we're standing at the brink of a fifth and what could be a final displacement. A displacement that will dwarf all the others. This is an event that one Stanford economist says will be the biggest change ever. Bigger than electricity, bigger than the steam engine. And while past displacements took centuries or decades to reshape the world, this one will do so in years, perhaps even in months. Not only unleashing immense economic growth, but doing it so rapidly that it blindsides almost everyone. And although you might think I'm talking about artificial intelligence, quantum computing, or the blockchain, the technology fueling the final displacement is far bigger than any of those. In fact, it's the underlying tech that enables each of those technologies and all of the remarkable advancements we've seen over the last few years. From OpenAI's ChatGPT to Waymo's self-driving cars to Tesla's forthcoming Optimus robots, all of these new things are enabled by one little-known technology, a technology that's been quietly reshaping the world around us for years now. Yet, you've never heard of it. Outside of the labs in the world's most prestigious universities and tech companies, almost no one has. But those who have, those who can see the writing on the wall, they're investing billions of dollars as they know this will transform everything. Mark Andreessen, Ben Horowitz, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Jensen Huang, and of course, Bill Gates. The list of major investors goes on and on. They know, as I do, that in a few years, we may not recognize the world we live in and that all the wealth will accrue to those who lead this space. It's not just the private markets either. Regulations are being slashed, roadblocks obliterated, and billions of dollars in government spending are being deployed. The only time we've witnessed anything like this was during World War II when President Franklin Roosevelt directed the full U.S. economy toward victory. Automakers stopped building cars and rolled out tanks and bombers instead. Steel plants started churning out munitions, and shipyards that once built cruise ships began launching battleships. But amidst all this, one factor is being willfully ignored, and that's the dark side of these technological displacements. Because although this new era we're entering will undoubtedly lead to another step change in economic growth, it could come at a devastating toll. One that many historians like to brush aside with platitudes of it was all in the name of progress or the good outweighed the bad. Maybe so, but for those people living through these upheavals, that's hardly a comfort because the carnage they endured was colossal. Through each displacement, tens of millions of people, through no fault of their own, found themselves the victims and not the victors. Consider the first displacement around the 5th century BC. Sure, it marked the first spark of economic growth after centuries of darkness, but it also enslaved entire populations. As the great empires of antiquity rose, they required unprecedented amounts of human capital to expand. From the serfs of Sparta to the slaves of Rome and Greece, untold millions labored and perished under the whip of a new ruling class. Or consider the impact of the printing press. Yes, it democratized knowledge, but also led to the Protestant Reformation, which in turn unleashed more than 30 years of religious wars. By the time it was over, millions of souls were lost. The steam engine and mechanized factories drove explosive economic growth in the 1800s, but they also displaced artisans and craftsmen. Families who had passed down specialized trades for generations suddenly saw their livelihoods vanish as their work was replaced by machines. Small workshops spread all across the land, giving way to giant industrialized factories. The displacement was so profound that it led to the birth and spread of Marxism because a huge, ever-growing urban proletariat looked for answers to the incredible inequality. Of course, no serious thinker would argue humans were better off without steam engines, computers, or the printing press. But if you were living through these changes, you might have seen things very differently. And that is exactly what I believe we're about to see again. An explosive period of unimaginable growth and wealth creation that simultaneously devastates the lives of millions of ordinary Americans. We could already see the early warning signs, whether it's New York City, once the home of capitalism, electing a full-blown communist mayor who's called for things like rent control and government grocery stores and even talked about seizing the means of production in the city. Or the skyrocketing popularity of Marxist politicians like Bernie Sanders and AOC who rail against the free markets and your right to wealth. We can see it in the economic pessimism poisoning our nation with the number of people who expect their standard of living to improve, hitting record lows. We can see it in the social decay of what I call anomie spreading with the popularity of things like prostitution on OnlyFans, drug addiction, and gambling. I believe these are all warning signs of a seriously broken society, but what almost everyone underestimates is that how dramatic this change will be, how fast it's accelerating, or how it will reset everything about life. Because the final displacement is unlike any of the others we've ever seen before in history. This isn't unfolding over centuries, decades, or even years, but in months. And it shows no signs of slowing. As Google's former chief business officer has warned, this is evolving at a speed none of us anticipated. This type of rapid change is not something we're prepared for socially or economically. And I mean that quite sincerely. You see, our brains have evolved to process linear change, not exponential change. This rate of change is not something people are naturally able to process, and that's why the world feels so unstable right now. It's why there's a gnawing sense of unease and deep-seated anxiety that's plaguing millions. It's a phenomenon called hypernovelty. This is when an accelerating storm of new technology, social shifts, and economic upheavals destroy humans' natural ability to adapt. Technological transformations that used to take decades now happen in months, and what used to happen in years can now happen sometimes in weeks. Our brains can't process this much change so fast in a healthy, irrational way. Keep in mind, we're still in the early days of this revolution. DeepMind CEO Sir Demis Hassabis says that the coming changes are going to be 10 times bigger than the Industrial Revolution, and they're going to happen 10 times faster. If he's right, and I believe he is, then the social fabric of America will be stretched to a breaking point. Because as this accelerates, the pressure will build. And when people can't adapt, they lash out. That's why I believe the coming years will bring unprecedented unrest, political violence, and economic outrage. A boiling point unlike anything we've seen before in modern history. See, despite all the changes we've seen so far, they're nothing compared to what's coming next, because everything we've seen so far was incremental and linear. You could see the technology advance from A to B to C, but this is a true paradigm shift, one that I believe will trigger the next great economic step change that transforms everything about how we work and live. I'm well aware how hyperbolic that may sound, but I'm willing to stake my reputation on it. And as you can see, I'm not the only one. To understand why, you need to realize that we've entered a new technological age, one that almost no one outside of Silicon Valley understands. Until now, computer processing has always been done using what's called serial computing. That means tasks on the computer are executed one at a time, one after another in a series. Think about it like dominoes. The first domino falls, then the second, and so on, with each domino relying on the prior one for the process to continue. This is how computers have operated for the last 70 years, ever since the Remington Rand Corporation built the first CPU. These CPUs, central processing units, are the brains of a computer, and since their invention, they've improved by roughly 50% every year. However, despite CPU's phenomenal processing power, they're limited by the constraint of processing only one task at a time, and after half a century of growth, computing power was beginning to stagnate. This was especially clear in the fields of deep and machine learning. Even the most advanced supercomputers, packed with thousands of CPUs, couldn't provide the computing power required. That's because the number of operations needed for just one of these algorithms can rival the total grains of sand on Earth. However, a group of academics from the University of Toronto shattered these limitations when they designed a whole new computing architecture. Their new AlexNet algorithm was so revolutionary, it turned the computer science world upside down, with Yann LeCun calling it an unequivocal turning point. And I'm not even being dramatic. This was known in computer theory as the Big Bang, but what almost everyone misunderstands is that this advancement wasn't the real breakthrough. What really matters is how the AlexNet team did it. You see, at that moment, they transformed the world by using a new type of computer processor to train their algorithm. It was this decision that laid the foundations of an entirely new era of computing, an era that's given birth to everything from AI to cryptocurrencies and mRNA vaccines to even augmented reality. The breakthrough of the AlexNet team was building their algorithms on a new type of computer chip, a graphical processing unit, not a CPU, a GPU. These GPUs were originally built to render computer game graphics, and they can process millions of operations at once. Going back to our domino analogy, instead of each GPU being knocked over sequentially, imagine all the dominoes falling at the same time simultaneously. This creates a computing capacity that's not more, it's exponentially greater than anything that a CPU processor could ever handle. It was this breakthrough of writing algorithms on GPUs instead of CPUs that unlocked a whole new era of computing. In the same way serial computer processing gave us personal computers, gave us the internet, gave us iPhones, and countless of other new innovations, parallel processing is ushering in an entirely new technological world that will create colossal fortunes for those on the frontier. OpenAI's ChatGPT, Waymo's self-driving cars, Tesla's Optimus robot, Zuckerberg's metaverse, AstraZeneca's accelerated drug discovery. Without the processing power of GPUs, none of these things would be possible. The result has already created trillions in economic value with stocks like Nvidia, Oracle, Tesla, Microsoft, Facebook, and Google surging in value. But this is only a taste of what's to come. Almost every single sector of the economy is adopting parallel processing in some form or another. So I'm not being a doomer. With a new report from PricewaterhouseCoopers saying that in every one of the 80-plus sectors studied, the use of this technology was increasing and there's no stopping this train. Soon every industry, every sector, every aspect of the economy from top to bottom will be swept up. And the parallel processing revolution will take them all. Of course, as with every technological leap forward, there will be voices of doom trying to scare you into paralysis, trying to make you fear this progress. Like during the Industrial Revolution when Thomas Malthus convinced much of the intelligence that unchecked population growth would overwhelm resources leading to famine and collapse. Many feared industrialization would be humanity's undoing. They were wrong in the long run as industrial advances lifted hundreds of millions from poverty. But in the short term, Malthus was right. London's population exploded, overcrowding was rampant, disease and squalor spread, infant mortality soared. The journey was brutal, even if the destination was worth it. And that's exactly what we're facing today. I have no doubt the parallel processing revolution will enrich our world in ways we can't even imagine. But first, unfortunately, it will displace millions of people. Whole professions are going to vanish. Entire industries will disappear. Once stalwart companies will be decimated, and your 401k, your savings, and other investments could collapse by 50% or more. Millions of hardworking Americans are going to be ground up in the gears of history through no fault of their own. As one of the industry's leading authors warns, we'll hit a short-term dystopia. There's no escaping that. That is the tragedy of every displacement. The long-term economic gains are undeniable, but in the short term, the devastation is catastrophic. Except, as I've warned, it could be far worse. And unless you take immediate actions, your financial future could be eviscerated, as many of the company's investments you own are wiped out. I fear that as these shockwaves spread, they won't just wipe out millions of jobs. They could vaporize trillions in household wealth. Think about it. Families are already stretched to the absolute breaking point. Credit card balances, auto loans, all of this consumer debt has swelled to a combined 14 trillion, and cracks in the credit quality are beginning to show. The job market is softening. Costs are rising, and economic pessimism is rising too. Now imagine what happens when millions of six-figure white-collar workers are suddenly replaced overnight by a computer algorithm that works without any rest and doesn't cost anything by the hour. This entire house of cards of our economy could come crashing down. Defaults could cascade throughout the entire mortgage market, across the credit cards, and into the stock market, triggering a brutal financial crisis that could further amplify and accelerate America's growing wealth divide. Think about the resulting civil unrest, the political chaos, and the inevitable cries for radical communism. This could be unlike anything we've ever seen in American history, and the people controlling this technology, they know about these risks too. Sam Altman is best known as the CEO of OpenAI, but what few people realize is he also quietly owns another company called WorldCoin. Its mission is to create a global biometric ID system that could be used to distribute universal basic income. Why? Because Altman knows the technology he's building at OpenAI will displace so many workers, governments will be forced to step in and pay people simply so they can survive. Think about that. While building OpenAI, he's also laying the groundwork for the fallout. This is a future where millions of Americans are pushed out of the workforce and left to rely on government handouts just to survive. That's the future Altman sees, a wealth divide so stark that while a handful of asset owners become trillionaires, tens of millions of Americans are left dependent on the dole. So the real question is, how do you make sure you're not on the wrong side of this incredible divide? That's what I've been preparing for and privately helping my friends, family, and readers prepare for too. Because while the upheaval itself is unavoidable, your outcome from these changes is not. You can either be a victim or you can be a victor. You can either find yourself growing richer than you ever imagined, or you could risk your wealth being eviscerated, ground up in the gears of history. The choice comes down to the steps that you're willing to take now. Because the final displacement is coming, there's no stopping it. But for those who act now while there's still time, they have the opportunity to build immense lasting wealth, which ensures their personal sovereignty and their family's security. While those who refuse to accept this reality are soon going to find themselves reliant on government handouts, universal basic income, and other forms of what amounts to financial slavery. And in the simplest terms, it all comes down to this: owning the right companies, the one that will make more money as the parallel processing revolution accelerates, while dumping the wrong companies, those that have assets that are destined to be casualties as industries, economics, and political systems are displaced by parallel processing. And just as I told readers in the past to sell companies like Bloom Energy and to buy companies like gold miners at the very beginning of this year, or when ahead of the choppy markets of October and November, I told readers about the trade. And in the aftermath of that chop, I recommended my readers to look at the commodities. Once again, today I'm advising readers to avoid certain companies while investing heavily in a handful of stocks I believe will benefit the most from these changes. History shows us that during every displacement, certain assets grow faster than ever before. Their revenues compound, their margins expand, their dominance grows, and their shareholders reap enormous returns. Imagine being one of Carnegie's early partners as he industrialized the steel business, or backing Rockefeller when he consolidated America's oil fields, or even just buying Microsoft at the beginning of the PC revolution. Unlike Andrew Carnegie's time, this time the fortunes will be even larger because GPUs and parallel processing creates infinite technological leverage. GPUs power algorithms and machines that actually learn, adapt, and create newer, more powerful versions of themselves every single minute of the day without additional input. This acts as an immense flywheel with every new breakthrough compounding into the next, accelerating progress while concentrating the rewards while everyone else is left further behind. And that's why I believe the wealth created during this final displacement could eclipse anything we've ever seen before and lift certain people to an entirely unprecedented level of wealth. Unlike other investors, however, I'm not attempting to speculate on which new startup will emerge victorious. I can't predict that. Nobody can. In this new era, it's almost impossible to decipher who will be the winners and losers because everything's evolving so fast. Instead, I'm betting on what I know for certain. And there's one thing that's all but guaranteed: the need for GPUs. The brains of the parallel processing revolution will continue to skyrocket, and companies will continue to demand more and better performance. In this realm, one company reigns supreme. I'm talking, of course, about NVIDIA. Because NVIDIA doesn't just design the world's most advanced GPUs and command more than 80% of the market share, they also control CUDA, the programming language that's become the industry standard for writing GPU-based programs. And through their acquisition of an Israeli company called Mellanox, they also control the high-speed interconnections that enable thousands of GPUs to work together in sync. Add it all up, and NVIDIA controls the entire ecosystem, a near total monopoly on the parallel processing revolution. Anyone who wants to harness the power of GPUs, anyone who wants to leverage machine learning, anyone who wants to operate in this new computing area, they need NVIDIA. And there's no other viable choice. As Forbes puts it, they own the keys to the parallel processing kingdom. While there are competitors trying to challenge NVIDIA's dominance, as one venture capitalist puts it, the bottom line here is it's nearly impossible to compete with them head on. NVIDIA is a world-class company that's built a near impregnable moat, and that's why NVIDIA is a core holding at Stocks Community. You might have missed NVIDIA in 2016 when my lab partner first started raving about GPUs and the cancer research lab we worked at. It's still not too late for you to capitalize NVIDIA's complete dominance, because what most investors don't know is that NVIDIA has this number of secret partners, smaller, lesser-known firms that work hand in glove with NVIDIA. And as you'll see, without these companies, NVIDIA's business would be hamstrung because each plays an almost impossible to replicate role in the development of NVIDIA's GPUs and CPUs. Partner number one is what I call the new OPEC because they sell the only machines in the world capable of manufacturing the sub-10 nanometer chips in NVIDIA's GPUs. Without them, NVIDIA would collapse. And over the last decade, they've compounded revenues at an annual rate of 19%. And with GPU use accelerating, this trend should continue, making it a must-have for all investors. Partner number two works hand in glove with the new OPEC and manufactures 90% of the chips needed for the parallel processing revolution. Their monopoly over this manufacturing chain gives them unbridled pricing power they've used to earn 40% net income margins over the last 3 years. This is one of the most profitable, well-run businesses in the world, and you've probably never heard its name. And that needs to change now because as parallel processing grows exponentially and as NVIDIA continues to expand, this company could make investors an absolute killing. Partner number three. Unlike NVIDIA's other partners, this company operates in the realm of intellectual property and design. Instead of capital-intensive manufacturing, they simply design the blueprints for the world's top-performing GPUs and CPUs. The beauty of their business is that they're able to create the design once and then sell it to companies who will use it for years, paying them each and every time. That makes it one of the most capital-efficient businesses I've ever seen. Case in point, they invest less than $400 million a year in CapEx, and they generate $4 billion in revenue with roughly $1 billion in free cash flow. And as trillions of dollars flow into this technological revolution, this company will continue to reap the rewards and could compound your money for decades to come. Inside my stocks community, I discuss the parallel processing revolution, and each weekday you'll get a full analysis of each company I picked for the trade of the day and why they could be among the greatest compounders of wealth over the next decade, potentially growing by double digits for years. Before I tell you how to get your free trial, there's an even bigger piece of this story I haven't told you about yet, and it's here that I believe the greatest profit potential could be found. I'm talking about the potential for asymmetric returns that hand you returns far greater than you likely imagined were possible from such relatively low-risk investments. Investments that I believe will be driven relentlessly higher year after year from events, unstoppable economic forces. You see, for the parallel processing revolution to get fully underway, a number of major roadblocks have to be overcome. Almost all of America's systems and infrastructure were built for serial computing demands, not parallel computing. In order for us to harness the parallel processing's power and the economic and financial potential, hundreds of billions will need to be invested in our aging infrastructure. I'm talking about data centers, telecommunications, factories, fiber optic networks, power transmission lines, satellites, manufacturing, transportation. They all need to be overhauled to support this new technology, and the cost to do so will be very high. However, it is essential if America wants to maintain its technological and economic lead in this new computing age, something our leaders see as non-negotiable. As President Trump says, it is a national security imperative to achieve unquestioned and unchallenged technological dominance. And they see all of this as a zero-sum game. If America doesn't win, China will. That's why Washington has shifted into what can only be described as a wartime footing. Whether it's slashing approval times for new mines from years down to weeks, reopening old coal plants, or securing strategic reserves of rare earth minerals, Washington knows that whoever is dominant in the world of parallel processing could dominate everything moving forward. That's why the government is pushing this technology forward, even though they know it will displace millions of workers. In their eyes, the alternative is far worse. It's this multi-trillion-dollar race that's opened the door to some of the greatest investment setups you're ever going to see. While everyone else is focused on new data centers, chip foundries, rare earth mines, and AI applications, I believe there's a far better and far safer way to capitalize on this wealth shift, and that's through the energy sector. See, the energy demands of parallel processing are insatiable, unlike any other technologically revolutionizing moment we've ever seen. Without enough energy, the entire parallel processing revolution will grind to a halt. That's something our government will never allow to happen. But right now, we can't handle these insatiable energy demands. The Trump administration is desperately trying to get ahead of this, from expediting environmental reviews to rolling back regulations to postponing the decommissioning of older energy plants and reviving coal, natural gas, and even nuclear generation. As one expert puts it, these moves are reactive. It's all too little, too late. That's because in serial computing, a typical server rack consumes about 100 kilowatt hours of electricity every day. That's roughly 3 times the power used in a family home. However, a GPU server rack for parallel processing uses 10 times the energy. This means on average, every GPU-based data center is consuming enough electricity to power 50,000 homes. And with both the private and public sector in an arms race to convert their data centers from serial CPUs to parallel processing GPUs, the combined energy consumption of all of these will be the equivalent of 30 million homes. That's about a quarter of all US households. And this is from the existing data centers only. There are construction plans and permits for 537 new data centers across America in total. It's estimated that more than $1 trillion will be spent on data centers over the next 4 years, and they will end up consuming almost 10% of our total electricity capacity. As the parallel processing revolution accelerates, the insatiable energy demands will continue to outpace supply, and this has created one of the most favorable investment setups I've ever seen. The last time I saw a setup like this was in the early 90s. Wall Street got set up in the mania in the internet boom. They were swept up and ignored other old economy sectors like energy. And by the peak of the dot-com bubble, the energy sector was historically cheap, the inverse of the overvaluation of the tech sector. So when the bubble burst, there was a massive mean reversion, resulting in many energy stocks exploding higher. Over the following decade, energy not only outperformed tech stocks by a wide margin, but also the entire stock market. Investors who'd been going against the grain and buying energy stocks at their historically low valuations made an absolute killing. I believe the stage is now set for a similar opportunity, except this time the potential returns could be even greater. Not only has the energy sector been suppressed for years due to anti-fossil fuel rhetoric and political pressure, but investments in new facilities, new exploration, new drilling, and new infrastructure have been massively suppressed by the campaigns of radical environmentalists. All at the exact same moment the world needs more and cheaper energy than ever before. Yet almost nobody is paying attention to the story. As tech stocks surge to unsustainable nosebleed valuations, energy stocks are trading around 24% below their historic price-to-earnings ratios. And the impact of this supply-demand crunch is going to accelerate. That means investors are going to wake up to the fact that without more and cheaper energy, the entire parallel processing revolution will be crippled. I expect the undervalued energy sector could make investors wildly wealthy, and in particular, there are 3 little-known companies that I believe could reap the largest rewards. 3 companies that every investor should have on their radar. This is what I call the king of coal. Since 2008, environmental activists have shut down hundreds of coal plants and slashed the number of active mines by 70%. In doing so, they've created a massive supply shortage, one that has the king of coal exploiting it for years now. By scooping up abandoned and shuttered mines on the cheap, they've quietly consolidated the market. And today, they're producing colossal amounts of coal despite the protests of activists. Yet Wall Street still won't touch the stock because many investors are terrified of being labeled anti-environment. That means this business, one of the greatest energy companies in the world, is trading at a fraction of its true value. However, once reality sets in that coal demand is only going to soar both here and abroad, I expect this company could go on a historic run and could make early investors a fortune. Inside this community, you'll get my full investigation into this phenomenal coal community, along with an in-depth analysis into why we believe investing in this coal company could be one of the most favorable setups of the decade. However, coal alone isn't enough to meet the energy demands of the parallel processing revolution. That's why despite years of political pledges and campaigns to end hydrocarbons, another dirty fuel is seeing all-time high usage, with more natural gas being used for power generation than ever before in history. What's more, as the promises of solar, wind, and other renewables fail to materialize, natural gas's share of power generation is expected to grow by 18 percentage points. According to S&P Global, I believe one little-known energy firm is best positioned to capitalize on growing demand for natural gas. While you've likely never heard of the gods of gas before, I believe they will soon be one of the world's most valuable energy companies. See, during the pandemic, when oil and gas prices plunged, the founders of this business made one of the smartest energy deals of all time, acquiring an $8 billion Marcellus shale operation for just $735 million. That deal cemented this business as the dominant player in the US natural gas market, and over the last year, we've already seen its stock rise by almost 50%. But this is only the beginning. As you'll see inside the community, I believe this company should be worth at least $100 billion. That's roughly 3 times more than it's currently trading at. But even that estimate is extremely conservative because, in my opinion, no one will produce more natural gas in America for the next 30 years. Everything you need to know about this is inside the community. It's the gods of gas. Finally, here's what I call the keystone. This firm isn't involved with coal, natural gas, or any hydrocarbons, but make no mistake, this is the future of clean and cheap energy. I'm talking about small modular reactors, or SMRs. These small nuclear energy plants are cheaper, safer, faster, and they can provide clean energy for a decade without refueling. Over the long term, this technology will be essential to powering the parallel processing revolution. It's why almost every tech mogul is pouring billions into SMR startups. Jeff Bezos has invested $100 million for SMRs. Bill Gates has invested $750 million. Peter Thiel has pledged $2 million. And not to mention Sam Altman, Reid Hoffman, and all the others. But there's only one company I would bet on, and inside the community, this is the keystone. You'll get its actual name and a full analysis on why it's already won the SMR arms race. Each of the companies we've covered today, whether it's NVIDIA's 3 secret partners, the king of coal, the gods of gas, or the keystone, they all stand to benefit from the parallel processing revolution. And I believe all Americans need to know about these companies, as they could deliver market-beating returns for years to come, while many other businesses are decimated by the final displacement. That's why I've combined all of this information analysis into a special one-of-a-kind community that lays out everything you need to know on a daily basis. You see, while each of these companies is involved in a different aspect of the parallel processing revolution, they're all actually interconnected. And in order to fully understand what's going on, what it means for the future of America, and how to ensure you're on the winning side of this wealth shift, you need to see how their products and services all intertwine. Most importantly, you need to know how to best capitalize on these businesses to rapidly build real and lasting wealth. And you need to do so without speculating on high-risk investments. My daily live streams are by far the most in-depth equity analysis that I've ever produced at my company, Stocks Community. As Neil, a member of the community, wrote after experiencing it, quote, "Is this real life?" He was blown away. He joined the trial in one sitting and then continued to ask me questions which were thought-provoking and made me really try to poke holes in my analysis, something I almost never am provoked to do. You guys have set an incredibly high bar with the caliber of research that's in this community. So congrats and compliments to everyone who's involved with it. The screeners alone would be worth the price of a subscription, the subscription that Neil took part in. It's to my flagship financial advisory community, Stocks Community. The weekly cost of our membership is $65, and as Neil put it, quote, "I made $16,000 in one day. That trade alone was the cost of the membership. Paid it many times over, but given the urgency and the importance of this story, I'm doing something very special that will allow you to get my best work without spending $65 a week. Why? Because over my decade-long career as first a technologist and now a financial analyst, I've only ever seen a handful of true can't-miss moments, moments that, if acted on, have the power to potentially transform your entire financial future, moments with the potential to make up for a lifetime of investing mistakes and missed opportunities. Like in September 2025, when I recorded a video to my founding subscribers saying I saw massive opportunities in USA rare earths. I told them I believed the rebound was happening and the market had reached the point of demand in rare earths, and that I was predicting the stock could go up significantly. I had never recorded anything this predictive to my subscribers before, and I've never recorded anything quite like it. so far since. And 2 weeks later, the stock USAR was up 169%, making it one of the biggest multi-week moves ever. And the ideas I shared with viewers that month were massive gains that could propel investors who watch the channel and join the community to a new level of wealth. I believe the final displacement could be one of those rare moments, one you could look back on as the moment everything changed for you financially, for the good or the bad, depending on what path you take. Because as you discovered today, parallel processing is going to transform the entire world. Millions of people who refuse to accept what's happening are going to be left behind. Meanwhile, those who educate themselves, who prepare, and who own the right assets could ascend to an entirely new level of prosperity as trillions of dollars flow into certain companies. Already, Goldman estimates an average of 1,600 new millionaires are being created every single day, but at the same time, millions of other Americans are struggling just to keep their head above water. So make no mistake, this wealth divide is going to accelerate. And I want to ensure that you're on the right side of that divide, which is why instead of the $65 I usually charge for access to Stocks Community's research, I'm giving you the chance today to get all our analysis into the parallel processing revolution at a massive discount. See, I've extracted everything I've done on this topic and combined it into one single and valuable weekday live stream. It's an exploration into every aspect of this new computing era, for how it started, where it's going, to the macroeconomic, social, financial impacts, all the way down to the nuts and bolts of how it works and what it means for you on a daily basis, your money, and the future of our country. It's all inside this community in the daily live streams, including deep dives into the companies most likely to benefit from this new multi-trillion-dollar technological revolution. And while it's only the monthly members of my community who get specific buy and sell ranges, ongoing active recommendations, and advice, I believe that what you'll get inside this 7-day trial of the community could be worth a small fortune to you in the years ahead, because nobody, whether it's a major Wall Street fund, an investment bank, or just another research group, has done more analysis into these daily trades than I have. And while I could typically charge $65 for access to my weekly research, today you can access the community for $25. It's a discount of $40, and it's a small price to pay to try out the community for 7 days. There's no fees to join the live stream, no annual subscriptions, nothing expensive to buy. You're automatically enrolled in the monthly subscription, and it is a one-click cancel, and you can cancel it anytime. It's far more important to me that I get this community into as many people's hands as possible so they can prepare for this wealth shift before it's too late. So to get your membership, simply click the link below this video in the description right now. And on the next page, you'll get a full recap of everything that's waiting for you as part of this special discounted offer, including a number of exclusive bonuses I've set aside for you, like proprietary screeners available for download in the Discord. As a Stocks Community member who signs up at free.stockscommunity.com, you'll also receive a weekly email from me with a text version of my YouTube video ideas. That means every time you receive that newsletter, you're going to get a transcript exploring the most important yet overlooked factors influencing the markets. And I'll bet that even our free research exceeds anything else you actually have to pay for. You'll also get a bonus briefing in the community when you DM me on WAP. And that's on the other energy company that I didn't have time to tell you about today. It's another foundational pillar of the parallel processing revolution, and just like the others we covered today, almost nobody has heard of it, but as you'll see, they're in prime position to benefit from the insane energy demands of GPUs. Despite this company being one of the greatest capital compounders of all time, growing by more than 10,000% over the last 2 decades, almost nobody has ever heard of it. And as Donald Hodges, co-founder of Hodges Capital, a firm with billions of dollars under management, says, excuse me, this business is about as good as an equation as I've seen since I've been in this business, which is 54 years. I haven't found a negative to it yet. As you'll see inside, the 100-year-old money machine even has greater upside ahead. And on the next page, you'll get all the details of my community, Stocks Community. So go ahead and click the button below now for more info while the special offer is still available. Thousands of investors have already benefited from research here watching this channel and position themselves for what could be the next great period of wealth creation. You need to ask yourself, will you join them in the community, or will you sit on the sidelines as one of the history's most transformational technologies changes the world before your eyes? I can't force you to make a choice here, but I hope that by making you such a compelling offer today, I'm able to remove any roadblocks to you getting on the right side of history. Because instead of paying $65 for weekly access to our analysis, you can get this complete 7-day trial for just $25. So take advantage of this special offer while it is still available by clicking the link below. Now, you'll be taken to a secure encrypted web page where you can review everything that's happening for you, including all the bonus resources and discounts. Plus, there's 10 minutes of training on how to buy stocks before they go up that you can review. Or if you prefer, you can just call me and I'll happily answer any questions you have about the special offer or the information I presented here. The choice is yours, and I hope you'll make the right one. But if you're still not sure, on the next page, you'll also see one other thing I've set aside for you. It's called the apple of agriculture, and it's a metaphor for how one of America's greatest companies, a true forever stock, has quietly adopted parallel processing into their core business. This is not a company that anyone else in the world is paying attention to right now because on the surface, it seems to have absolutely nothing to do with technology. But as you'll see, the apple of agriculture is adopting these new technologies to not only improve their already exceptional business, but to ensure their 2-century-long dominance and agriculture remains unchallenged. This is one of my all-time favorite companies. It's an icon of America, and as you'll see, the upside potential here could be enormous as they transform into the apple of agriculture. Just DM me on WAP once you're in the community, and I'll send you the ticker name. All the details are on the next page for you.